Welcome to Whispering Ages. Tonight, the reel turns slowly, and the past flickers back to life, one frame at a time. They say film captures truth, that when light meets silver, it remembers everything, every smile, every shadow, every sin. But what if a film could remember too much? This story begins on a foggy English evening in 1937, inside a mansion built not of stone, but of memory, Ravenhill Manor. There, among the velvet curtains and polished champagne glasses, a small gathering prepares to watch a film no one has seen for decades. A silent picture, restored from dust and myth. The end of the whisperer. The projector hums. The lights fade. And on the screen, someone walks the halls of Ravenhill, step by step, until they stop, turn, and die. The audience gasps, because at that very moment, a real scream echoes through the room. The host, Sir Alaric Penrose, sits frozen in his chair, and as the film keeps rolling, his blood begins to dry. A murder that played itself before it happened. A film that remembers more than it should. And two minds, one of logic, one of intuition, drawn together again to uncover a killer who hides behind a shimmer of illusion. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Whispering Ages, because every week we unspool another mystery, another echo from the shadows of time. And tell me in the comments below, do you believe the camera can capture the soul? Now, sit back, listen closely, and keep your eyes on the light, because tonight's story doesn't end when the film stops. It ends at the last frame. The joint case, murder at the end of the film reel. A Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple mystery. Chapter 1. The Silver Light of Memory. The year was 1937, and England wore the peculiar beauty of late autumn, like a dowager's faded jewels. The countryside near Henley-on-Thames stretched in gentle undulations of amber and rust, the trees standing sentinel over lanes that wound through the landscape like threads through old tapestry. It was upon one such lane that Miss Jane Marple found herself on the afternoon of October 15th, seated in a motor car driven by Eleanor Penrose, a woman she had met only 6 weeks prior at Church Restoration Committee meeting in London. Eleanor was a soft-spoken creature of perhaps 50 years, with pale eyes that seemed always on the verge of apology. "You're very kind to accept my brother's invitation on such short notice," Eleanor said, her gloved hands tight upon the steering wheel. "Alaric so rarely entertains anymore. I do hope the evening won't be too peculiar." Miss Marple, whose experience with peculiarity was considerably more extensive than her gentle demeanor suggested, merely smiled. "I'm quite looking forward to it, my dear. A private film screening sounds perfectly delightful. I haven't attended the cinema in some months." "This won't be quite like the cinema," Eleanor replied, and something in her voice made Miss Marple glance at her more closely. But Eleanor's expression remained placid, her eyes fixed upon the road ahead. They rounded a final bend, and Ravenhill Manor revealed itself through a gap in the trees. It was a striking building, all clean lines and geometric elegance, its Art Deco facade gleaming white against a darkening sky. Windows of frosted glass caught the dying light, and the whole structure seemed to hover between eras, neither quite modern nor traditionally English, but something apart. "How beautiful," Miss Marple remarked. "Yes," Eleanor said quietly. "My brother built it 15 years ago, after he returned from Hollywood. He said England needed to learn how to dream in new shapes." She paused. "I've never been quite certain whether he succeeded or simply constructed a very expensive monument to his own imagination." They pulled up the circular drive, where 2 other motor cars already stood. A butler emerged from the front entrance, a man of middle years with the kind of face that revealed nothing and remembered everything. "Good evening, Miss Penrose," he said, opening Eleanor's door with practiced efficiency. "Miss Marple, welcome to Ravenhurst. I am Clay. Sir Alaric is in the library with the other guests. If you would care to freshen up first, I can show you to your rooms." "That would be lovely, thank you," Miss Marple replied, accepting his assistance from the motor car. The interior of Ravenhurst Manor was as extraordinary as its exterior. The entrance hall soared upward in a cathedral of chrome and marble, with a sweeping staircase that seemed to float without visible support. Everywhere Miss Marple looked, she saw evidence of the cinema: framed film posters in polished frames, vintage cameras mounted on pedestals like sculptures, and along one entire wall, shelves upon shelves of film canisters, each labeled in meticulous handwriting. Clay led her up the stairs to a guest room that combined comfort with theatrical flair. A large mirror dominated one wall, its frame fashioned to resemble a camera lens. The bed was draped in silver silk, and beside it stood a small table upon which someone had placed a vase of white roses. "Dinner will be served at 7, Miss Marple," Clay informed her. "The screening will begin at 8:30 precisely. Sir Alaric requests that all guests be in the cinema room by 8:20. "How very exact," Miss Marple observed. "Sir Alaric believes that timing is the essence of art, madam." Clay's expression remained neutral, but Miss Marple caught something in his tone. Perhaps irony, perhaps something darker. After Clay departed, Miss Marple moved to the window. Below, she could see a portion of the garden, where stone pathways wound between sculpted hedges. A figure walked there, a woman in a dark coat, her posture suggesting both elegance and melancholy. As Miss Marple watched, the woman paused beside a fountain, her head bowed as if in prayer or profound thought. A knock at the door interrupted her observation. Eleanor entered, now changed into an evening dress of pale blue that made her look even more ethereal. "I thought I might show you down to the library," Eleanor said. "The others have arrived. There's someone I think you'll find most interesting, a Belgian gentleman, a detective of some renown, Monsieur Hercule Poirot." Miss Marple's eyes brightened with genuine interest. "Indeed? How fascinating. I've read of his cases in the newspapers." They descended together, and Eleanor led the way through corridors decorated with more film memorabilia. They passed a room where Miss Marple glimpsed what appeared to be an editing suite, the walls lined with more equipment than she could identify. "My brother's obsession," Eleanor said, following her gaze. "He's been restoring old films for the past decade. Most of them are his own work from the silent era. He was quite successful, before the talkies came, but he never adapted. He says that true cinema died when it learned to speak." The library was a circular room dominated by a domed skylight, through which the evening sky was visible, clouds moving across the glass like thoughts across a troubled mind. Bookshelves lined the walls, but they held as many film scripts as books. In the center of the room, arranged around a low table set with drinks, stood the other guests. Miss Marple's first impression was of a tableau carefully arranged for dramatic effect. Near the fireplace stood a small man with a magnificent mustache, his bearing suggesting both precision and pride. This could only be Hercule Poirot. Beside him, gesturing with animated enthusiasm, was a young man of perhaps 30, handsome in a boyish way, his fair hair slightly disheveled. On the opposite side of the room, a woman of indeterminate age reclined in a velvet armchair with the studied grace of someone accustomed to being observed. She wore black silk and pearls. Her face, still beautiful despite the lines that time and experience had drawn there, This Miss Marple guest was someone who had once commanded attention effortlessly and now had to work at it. Standing somewhat apart near a window was a man in clerical attire, tall, gaunt, with the burning eyes of either a zealot or someone harboring a particularly consuming secret. And finally, entering through another door with the confidence of ownership, came their host. Sir Alaric Penrose was a man of late middle age, with silver hair swept back from a high forehead and eyes of such pale blue they seemed almost colorless. He dressed impeccably in evening clothes, and when he moved, it was with the deliberation of someone constantly aware of how he appeared to others. "Ah, Eleanor," he said, his voice melodious and theatrical. "And this must be the estimable Miss Marple. Welcome, welcome. You find yourself in distinguished company this evening." He gestured around the room. "Allow me to make introductions. Monsieur Hercule Poirot, whom I have the honor of knowing through our mutual friend, Mr. Alastair Drummond, who funded the restoration of tonight's film." Poirot inclined his head with European formality. "Enchanted, Mademoiselle Marple. Sir Alaric has promised us a most unusual entertainment. This is Miles Garvey," Sir Alaric continued, indicating the young man, who performed the actual restoration work on the film. "A genius with antiquated equipment. Aren't you, my boy?" Miles Garvey smiled, though Miss Marple noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're too kind, Sir Alaric. I merely cleaned what you created. And here," Sir Alaric moved to the woman in the armchair, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, "is Miss Vivian Vale, who graced the silver screen during cinema's golden age. You may remember her from such classics as The Phantom's Bride and Midnight Garden." Vivian Vale extended a languid hand, though she remained seated. "You're too generous, Alaric. That age is long past, as are its glories. Beauty such as yours defies time, my dear," Sir Alaric replied. But there was something cruel in the compliment, something that made Vivian's smile tighten. "And finally, Reverend Lionel Cottam, our local spiritual guardian." Sir Alaric's tone took on a mocking edge. "He's here to ensure that what we screen tonight doesn't imperil our immortal souls." The Reverend stiffened. "You know very well, Penrose, that I came at your explicit invitation. You said you wished to make amends for past indiscretions." "Did I?" Sir Alaric smiled. "How curious. Well, you're here now, and that's what matters. Now, shall we have drinks before dinner? I have a rather fine sherry, or, if you prefer, champagne. Tonight is a celebration, after all." As the group mingled and accepted drinks from Clay, who had appeared silently to serve, Miss Marple found herself beside Hercule Poirot. The little Belgian was studying the room with evident interest, his eyes moving from face to face with the precision of someone cataloging information. "An interesting gathering, is it not?" he murmured to her in French-accented English. "One observes that everyone in this room has history with our host, yet none of them appear particularly pleased to be here. Except perhaps Mr. Garvey," Miss Marple replied quietly, "though even his pleasure seems rather calculated." "Ah, you observe also. Très bien. Sir Alaric is the type of man who collects people as he collects his films, for their utility and his entertainment. I wonder what purpose we serve in his collection tonight. I confess I've been wondering the same thing, Monsieur Poirot. My invitation came through Eleanor, who seemed most anxious that I accept, almost as if she felt I might be needed." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Indeed? Curious. My own invitation suggested merely an evening of cinematic nostalgia. Sir Alaric said he wished to honor his financier by sharing this premiere with Drummond's closest associate. which I suppose I am in matters of investment. But now I wonder if there is more to this gathering than a simple screening. Their conversation was interrupted by Sir Alaric tapping his glass with a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would join me in raising your glasses. Tonight we witness something extraordinary. The premiere of a film that hasn't been seen in 20 years. The End of the Whisperer was my final project in the silent era, and has been locked away for reasons that will become apparent. Mr. Garvey has restored it beautifully, and I believe it represents my finest work. So, to cinema, to memory, and to the images that outlive us all. They raised their glasses, though Miss Marple noticed that Eleanor barely touched hers to her lips, and Reverend Cottam set his down untasted. Dinner was a strange affair. The dining room continued the Art Deco theme, with a table of polished obsidian reflecting the candlelight from above. The meal itself was excellent. Clay proved as capable in service as in discretion, but the conversation remained stilted, circling around topics without ever quite landing on them. Sir Alaric dominated the discussion, telling stories of the early days of cinema, of Hollywood in the 20s, of directors and actors whose names Miss Marple recognized from newspaper headlines of a decade past. Vivian Vale occasionally interjected with her own memories, each one seeming to contradict or diminish Sir Alaric's version of events, which he accepted with a smile that grew increasingly tight. Miles Garvey asked technical questions about filming techniques, which Sir Alaric answered with the enthusiasm of a teacher who has finally found an interested pupil. Eleanor said little, pushing her food around her plate. Reverend Cottam ate mechanically, his eyes occasionally rising to Sir Alaric with an expression Miss Marple couldn't quite read. Anger mixed with something that might have been fear. Poirot, Miss Marple noticed, observed everything while appearing to focus on his excellent meal. His eyes moved constantly, noting gestures, expressions, the small tells that people revealed when they thought attention was elsewhere. "Tell me, Sir Alaric," Poirot said during a lull in the conversation, "why has this film remained unseen for 20 years? You speak of it with pride, yet you have hidden it away." Sir Alaric's expression became grave. "There was an accident during production. My cameraman, a brilliant young man named Thomas Whalen, died. He fell from a platform while filming the final scene. Some said the platform was faulty. Others whispered of suicide, even murder. The film was deemed cursed, and in my grief and confusion, I locked it away. But time," he smiled faintly, "has a way of making curses seem merely superstitious." "How horrible!" Eleanor whispered. "Yes," Sir Alaric agreed, though Thomas would have wanted his work to be seen. He believed, as I do, that film has the power to capture truth in ways that mere words cannot. Tonight, we honor his memory as well as the art we created together. Vivian Vale's laugh was harsh. "How noble you sound, Alaric, as if you cared about anyone but yourself." The table fell silent. Sir Alaric's smile didn't waver. "Vivian, my dear, your bitterness ages you far more than time ever could." Before she could respond, Clay entered and murmured something to Sir Alaric, who nodded and rose. "Ah, excellent. The cinema room is prepared. If you would all follow me, the screening will begin shortly." They processed through the house like communicants approaching an altar, which, Miss Marple reflected, was not entirely inappropriate given cathedral-like atmosphere of reverence and dread that seemed to permeate Ravenhurst Manor. The cinema room was unlike any Miss Marple had seen. It was long and narrow, more like a chapel than a theater, with a dozen velvet seats arranged in 2 rows facing a large white screen. Heavy curtains covered the walls, and at the back of the room, elevated on a platform, stood the projector, a magnificent machine of brass and glass that gleamed in the low light. Sir Alaric directed them to their seats. Miss Marple found herself in the back row between Eleanor and Poirot. Vivian Vale took a seat in the front row, directly centered before the screen. Miles Garvey moved the projector, making final adjustments. Reverend Cottam sat rigidly in the front row, his hands clasped in his lap. Clay closed the curtains, and the room became almost preternaturally dark. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sir Alaric said from his seat in the center of the front row, directly before the screen, "I present the end of The Whisperer. Please, no interruptions until the film concludes." The projector whirred to life, and light spilled across the screen. Chapter 2, The Illusion of Death. The film began with a title card and elaborate script. The End of the Whisperer, a film by Alaric Penrose, 1917. What followed was immediately unsettling. The opening shot showed Ravenhurst Manor itself, though from an angle that made it appear almost alien. The Art Deco lines transformed into something otherworldly by the black and white photography and peculiar camera angles. The sky behind it roiled with clouds that moved too quickly, as if time itself had been accelerated. A figure appeared in the lower corner of the frame, a man in period costume, walking toward the house. As he approached, the camera followed him through the front door and into corridors that Miss Marple recognized from her earlier walk through the manor. The silent film aesthetic, jerky movements, dramatic gestures, exaggerated expressions, lent everything a dreamlike quality. Miss Marple became aware of Eleanor trembling beside her. She reached over and patted the woman's hand gently. On screen, the figure, whom Miss Marple now recognized at the start as a younger version of Sir Alaric himself, moved through the house as if searching for something. Title cards appeared. The Whisperer calls from beyond the silver light. But some voices should remain silent. The figure entered a room, the very cinema room they now sat in, though it appeared different in the film, more ornate, with different furnishings. He approached where the screen would be and stared directly at the camera, his expression shifting from curiosity to horror. Suddenly, a shadow fell across him. The figure turned. Another title card. Some endings are written in light and blood. And then, with the jerky violence characteristic of silent film, the figure was attacked. A struggle ensued, filmed in rapid cuts that made it difficult to see exactly what was happening. The attacker's face was never shown clearly, always in shadow or turned away. The figure fell. The camera moved closer, showing his face in profile, definitely Sir Alaric as a young man, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Blood spread across his white shirt, dark as ink in the monochrome image. The film flickered, frames jumping erratically, and then something extraordinary happened, something that made Miss Marple lean forward in her seat and Poirot inhale sharply. The scene shifted. Now the film showed the interior of the cinema room as it currently appeared, with the modern furnishings and arrangement. And seated in the chairs, barely visible in projected light, were figures that looked remarkably like the current audience. A whisper ran through the room. Vivian Vale let out a small cry. "What is this?" Reverend Cottam demanded, half rising from his seat. "Silence," Sir Alaric commanded. "Watch." On screen, the figure, still the young Sir Alaric, rose from where he had fallen, but his movements were strange, mechanical, as if he were a puppet. He walked toward the camera, his eyes fixed on something beyond the lens, and reached out. A scream shattered the darkness. It took Miss Marple a moment to realize it had come from Eleanor beside her. The woman was pointing at the screen, her voice rising in panic. Look at him." Everyone's eyes went to Sir Alaric in his seat. He sat perfectly still, his head tilted back slightly, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. In the flickering light of projector, he appeared to be watching the screen calmly. "Eleanor, control yourself," he said, but his voice sounded strange, thick, slurred. The film continued to play, now showing a close-up of the young Sir Alaric's face on screen. His mouth moved, forming words that appeared in the title card. "The end is only the beginning." And then, from Sir Alaric's seat, came a horrible wet sound, a gurgle, a gasp. "Lights!" Poirot commanded sharply. "Someone turn on the lights." Miles Garvey fumbled with switches near the projector. The overhead lights blazed on, painful after the darkness. Sir Alaric Penrose sat in his chair, his head now lolled completely back, his eyes staring at the ceiling. And across his throat, a thin red line was growing wider. Blood began to flow down onto his white shirt collar. Eleanor screamed again. Vivian Vale stood frozen, her hand to her mouth. Reverend Cottam stumbled backward, nearly falling. Clay appeared in the doorway, summoned by the commotion, his usually impassive face showing genuine shock. Poirot was already moving, reaching Sir Alaric's side in 3 quick strides. He touched the man's neck, checking for a pulse, then looked up at Miss Marple, who had also risen. "He is dead," Poirot said quietly. "His throat has been cut, and the blood, it is still flowing. This happened only moments ago." "But that's impossible," Miles Garvey said, his voice shaking. "We were all here. We all saw. No one left their seats. No one could have. Yet someone did." Poirot interrupted. He looked around the room with fierce concentration. "Miss Marple, please ensure that no one leaves this room. Clay, you'll go immediately to the telephone and summon the police. Tell them we have a murder." "Murder?" Reverend Cottam's voice was hollow. "But we all saw the film. It showed his death before it happened. This is witchcraft, judgment divine. This is murder," Poirot said firmly. "Cleverly staged, perhaps, but murder nonetheless. Now, everyone will please remain exactly where you are. Do not touch anything. Do not move from your positions." Miss Marple surveyed the room with sharp eyes. The projector continued to hum, though the film had ended, showing only white light on the screen. The murder weapon. It must be here somewhere. She began to look carefully around Sir Alaric's chair, being careful not to disturb anything. There, on the floor beside the projector platform, glinting in the light, a straight razor, its blade dark with blood. "Monsieur Poirot," she said quietly, pointing. He moved to examine it, without touching it. A razor, and placed here deliberately, I think. See how it lies? Too neat to position. This was meant to be found. Clay returned, his face even paler than usual. "Sir, I've encountered a problem. The telephone line appears to be dead. And when I looked outside, the storm that was forecast has arrived. The roads are already flooding. The bridges over the river will be impassable within the hour." Poirot's expression darkened. "Convenient. Very convenient indeed." He looked at Miss Marple. "It seems, mademoiselle, that we are trapped here with a murderer, and until the roads clear or the telephone can be repaired, we are on our own." "Then we must ensure everyone's safety," Miss Marple replied calmly, though her mind was racing. "And we must discover the truth before the killer strikes again, if that is their intention." Eleanor had collapsed into her chair, sobbing quietly. Vivian Vale stood motionless, still staring at Sir Alaric's body, as if unable to look away. Miles Garvey had moved the projector and was clutching its side, his knuckles white. Reverend Cottam had begun to pray in a low, fervent voice. Poirot clapped his hands sharply. "Attention! We will move to another room, the library, I think. Clay, you will help me move Sir Alaric's body to a room where it can be secured. Miss Marple will escort the others. No one is to be left alone. We must consider everyone a potential suspect and take precautions accordingly." "Suspect," Miles Garvey said. "But none of us could have done this. We were all sitting here, watching. The lights were out, but we would have noticed if someone had moved, if someone had approached Sir Alaric." "Would we?" Poirot asked quietly. In the darkness, with all eyes on the screen, with that strange film commanding our attention? "I think, monsieur, that is exactly what the killer counted upon." Miss Marple noticed something then, a faint smell in the air, sweet and chemical. She had encountered it before, in her nephew's medical practice. "Monsieur Poirot, do you smell that?" He lifted his head, sniffing delicately. "Oui. Ether, unless I am mistaken. Someone in this room has been exposed to ether recently." They looked at each other with shared understanding. The murder was even more calculated than it first appeared. As Clay and Poirot carefully lifted Sir Alaric's body, Miss Marple ushered the remaining guests toward the door. Eleanor clung to her arm, still weeping. Vivian Vale walked like a woman in a trance. Miles Garvey and Reverend Cottam followed, neither meeting the other's eyes. Behind them, the projector finally sputtered and died, plunging the cinema room into shadow. And on the screen, barely visible, the last frame of the film remained projected, a pale image of a face staring out at them, frozen forever in a silent scream. Chapter 3. The Guests of Ravenhurst. The library had become an impromptu gathering place, an interrogation room. Clay had lit the fire, and its warmth did little to dispel the chill that had settled over the group. Rain lashed against the windows now, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm had indeed arrived with remarkable timing. Poirot had taken charge with the natural authority of someone accustomed to investigating murder. He had arranged the seating so that everyone could be observed, and he stood before the fireplace like a lecturer before students, though his students were far more reluctant than most. Miss Marple had taken a seat near Eleanor, who had finally stopped sobbing, and now sat with the exhausted stillness of someone whose emotions had been entirely spent. Vivian Vale had claimed the armchair she had occupied earlier. Her elegant composure somewhat restored, though her hands trembled as she lit a cigarette. Miles Garvey paced near the bookshelves, unable to sit still. Reverend Cottam had positioned himself near the door, as if contemplating escape. "Now," Poirot began, "we must establish the facts. Sir Alaric Penrose is dead, murdered in a room where 6 other people were present. The method was precise. His throat was cut with a straight razor while we all watched the film. Yet none of us saw the attack occur. This suggests several possibilities. That it was supernatural," Reverend Cottam interjected. "The film showed his death before it happened. We all saw it. This is divine judgment for his sins." "I do not deal in the supernatural, Reverend," Poirot replied firmly. "I deal in human nature, which is far more devious than any ghost. What we saw was a clever illusion designed to distract us from the real murder. Now, I will speak to each of you individually. But first, some questions for all. Did anyone leave their seat during the film?" Silence. Then Miles Garvey spoke up. "I left the projector platform briefly to adjust one of the curtains. The film was flickering, and I thought the draft might be causing it. But that was only for a moment, and I never went near Sir Alaric's seat. When was this? Early in the film, perhaps 5 minutes after it began. Did anyone else move? More silence. Then Vivian Vale said quietly, I dozed off for a moment. The warmth of the room, the darkness. I woke when Eleanor screamed. You doze. Poirot's eyebrows rose. During a film you were supposedly eager to see? I've seen enough films, Monsieur Poirot. They no longer hold much interest for me. Her tone was bitter. How convenient, mademoiselle, that you slept through a murder. I didn't, she began hotly, then stopped. I don't know what you're implying. I imply nothing yet. I merely gather facts. Poirot turned to the others. The rest of you remained alert throughout? Nod from Eleanor and Reverend Cottam. Miss Marple said, I watched the film, though I confess my attention wandered occasionally to observe the others' reactions. The film was quite disturbing. Disturbing how precisely? The way it seemed to show the actual cinema room, with figures that resembled us. It was as if someone had filmed us without our knowledge and incorporated that footage into the old film. Impossible, of course, but unsettling nonetheless. Not impossible, Miles Garvey said. It could be done with careful editing, superimposition of images. If someone had photographed the room and the seating arrangement previously, they could have created that effect. It wouldn't be perfect, but in the darkness, with the flickering of old film, it might appear seamless. Poirot regarded him with interest. You speak from expertise. Could you have created such an effect? Technically, yes, but I didn't. I restored the film Sir Alaric gave me. I didn't alter its content. He paused. At least not intentionally. Though now I wonder Sir Alaric might have made changes without telling me. Why would he do that? Miles hesitated. Sir Alaric was obsessed with creating the perfect film experience. He believed in shocking the audience, making them question reality. This might have been his final performance, his masterpiece, a masterpiece that ended in his own death. Poirot shook his head. No, Monsieur Garvey, this was not Sir Alaric's plan. This was someone else's design. Clay entered with a tea tray, moving silently around the room. Miss Marple noticed that he served everyone except Vivian Vale, whose cup he seemed to avoid. An oversight or something more deliberate. Clay, Poirot said, you were not in the cinema room during the screening. Where were you? In the kitchen, sir, preparing the after-film refreshments as Sir Alaric had instructed. I heard the scream and came immediately. Did you see or hear anything unusual before that? No, sir, though I will say that the house has been unsettled today. Sir Alaric was agitated this afternoon. He sent me away several times when I attempted to attend to him, most unlike his usual manner. Did he say why? No, sir, but I observed that he spent considerable time in the cinema room, alone. He also had a visitor. Everyone looked up sharply. A visitor? Poirot leaned forward. Who? I don't know, sir. They came to the side entrance. Sir Alaric met them there and spoke briefly. I only saw them from a distance, a figure in a dark coat and hat. They left before I could approach. What time was this? Approximately 5 o'clock, sir. Poirot absorbed this. And no one else saw this visitor? I was in the garden at 5. Eleanor said quietly. I saw no one, but I heard voices. I assumed Alaric was speaking with one of the staff. I see. Poirot turned to Miss Marple. Mademoiselle, you observed everyone during the film. Did you notice anything else unusual? Any movements, any sounds? Miss Marple considered carefully. I heard breathing heavy, as if someone were distressed or fighting sleep. And there was a moment when I looked at the window rather than the screen. I saw something curious. The reflection of the film should have shown the same image as the screen, but it didn't. The reflection continued moving even when the film appeared to have jammed. Poirot's eyes lit up. "Ah, most significant. You are certain of this?" "Quite certain. I noticed because of the discrepancy. At the time, I thought it was a trick of the light. But now I wonder if there were two films being projected simultaneously." "Two films." Miles Garvey looked stunned. "But that would require a second projector or a modification to the existing one. A synchronized loop running underneath the main reel, perhaps creating a composite image. Could such a thing be done?" Poirot demanded. "Theoretically, yes, with sufficient skill and the right equipment. But why? To create the illusion we witnessed. To make it appear that the film predicted the murder, when in fact the film was the murder. The distraction under cover of which the real killing occurred." Poirot began to pace. "Consider, we are all watching the screen, yes? Our attention is completely captured by the disturbing images. The room is dark. If someone moved quietly, if they had prepared their approach, they could reach Sir Alaric's seat unobserved. But the blood," Eleanor whispered, "we would have heard something. He would have cried out. Not if he had been drugged first. Remember the smell of ether? Someone administered it to Sir Alaric before or during the film, rendering him unconscious or semi-conscious. Then, while we watched the screen, the killer struck. The razor was probably placed aside the projector afterward as misdirection, the weapon displayed prominently while the true method was concealed." Vivian Vale stubbed out her cigarette with sudden violence. "This is all conjecture. You have no proof, no evidence. You're simply making up theories. At present, I theorize. But theories lead to truth, mademoiselle, if one follows them with diligence." Poirot studied her. "Your gloves, if you would be so kind as to remove them." "I beg your pardon?" "Your gloves. I wish to examine them." Vivian's face paled. "I will do no such thing. This is harassment. It is investigation. If you refuse, it suggests you have something to hide." After a long moment, Vivian slowly removed her gloves and handed them to Poirot. He examined them carefully, then lifted them to his nose. "Makeup," he said. "Stage makeup which has left stains. And something else, machine oil, the type used to lubricate projection equipment." He looked at her steadily. "You touched the projector, Mademoiselle Vale. When and why?" She faltered. "Earlier, before dinner. I wanted to see the film canister, to verify it was really the end of the Whisperer. Alaric and we had history with that film." "What sort of history?" Vivian laughed, a harsh sound. "I was in it, Monsieur Poirot. Did no one tell you? The female lead in that cursed production was me. I was Alaric's muse, his lover, his star, until the cameraman died, and Alaric decided I was somehow to blame. He cut me from the film, destroyed my career with his whispers of bad luck and curses. He ruined me, Monsieur Poirot. So yes, I touched his precious projector. I wanted to see if he had restored the scenes with me in them, or if he had erased me even from history. And had he? I don't know. I couldn't open the canister. It was sealed." She met his gaze defiantly. "But I didn't kill him, if that's what you're suggesting. I wanted to. God knows I've dreamed of it for 20 years. But I didn't. Yet you had motive, opportunity, and you handled equipment related to crime. As did Miles." Vivian pointed at the young man. He restored the film. He had complete access to the projector. If anyone could have rigged it to create illusions, it would be him. Miles Garvey's face flushed. That's absurd. Why would I kill Sir Alaric? He was my patron, my chance at making a name in the restoration field. His death ruins me professionally. Does it? Poirot asked mildly. Or does it perhaps make you notable? The restorer involved in a sensational murder case? Such publicity, even dark publicity, can launch careers. You can't be serious. I would never. Miles stopped, his jaw clenching. I had no reason to kill him. Are you certain? Let us speak of your finances, monsieur. I understand you are somewhat indebted. Miles went white. How did you? I make it my business to know the circumstances of those involved in mysteries. Sir Alaric's financier, Mr. Drummond, mentioned that you had requested an advance on your payment. Quite a substantial advance. He wondered at the time if you were being entirely truthful about the cost of restoration. I needed the money, Miles admitted quietly. I had debts, yes. Gambling debts, if you must know. I'm not proud of it, but I would never kill for money. Never. Poirot turned to Reverend Cottam, who had been listening to these exchanges with increasing agitation. And you, Reverend? What was your relationship with the deceased? The Reverend's face was a mask of conflicting emotions. I barely knew the man. He occasionally attended services, though not with any regularity. I came tonight because he said he wished to make a charitable donation to the church, a significant one. He said he wanted to make amends for past wrongs. What wrongs? He didn't specify. I assumed he meant his general licentiousness, his obsession with art over morality. The Reverend's voice dropped. But there were rumors in the village. Ugly rumors about what went on at Ravenhouse during the filming days. Young women who came here seeking stardom and left changed, or didn't leave at all. Eleanor made a small sound of distress. Lionel, please, don't speak of such things. Those were just village gossip. Were they, Eleanor? The Reverend's eyes were fierce. Your brother was not a good man. We all know it. Perhaps his death was indeed judgment. Judgment delivered by whose hand? Poirot asked sharply. God's or yours, Reverend? I am a man of peace. Yet you carry the scent of the cinema room on your clothes. I noticed it when you entered the library. You say you were seated throughout the film, yet you smell of machine oil and dust, the particular dust of old film reels. Reverend Cottam's hand went to his collar. I did go to the cinema room earlier this afternoon. I was looking for Sir Alaric. I wanted to discuss the donation privately before the gathering. I found the room empty, but I looked around. Is that a crime? It is suspicious, Poirot replied, as is the fact that you seem to know much about Sir Alaric's past sins. Knowledge suggests either research or participation. Reverend, which was it? Before the Reverend could answer, the door burst open and Clay entered. His composure finally cracked. Sir, you must come. The body, Sir Alaric's body, it's been disturbed. Everyone rose as one. Poirot was already moving. Disturbed how? Where did you leave it? In his study, sir, as you instructed. I locked the door and kept the key. But when I went just now to ensure the windows were secured, I found Clay swallowed hard. The body has been moved, and there's something else, something written on the wall. They rushed through the corridors, Poirot in the lead, Mississippi Marple close behind. The study door stood open, revealing a room lined with more film memorabilia and a large desk. Sir Alaric's body lay on the floor now instead of the settee where they had left it, positioned carefully on its back with arms crossed over the chest. but it was the wall that drew everyone's horrified attention. Written there in what appeared to be Sir Alaric's own blood were the words, "The Whisperer sees all." Eleanor screamed and buried her face in Miss Marple's shoulder. Vivian Vale turned away, her hand over her mouth. Miles Garvey stood frozen in the doorway. Only Reverend Cottam stepped forward, his face filled with an almost ecstatic terror. You see? This is no human agency. The film was cursed, and now the curse has claimed him. The Whisperer, whatever he summoned in that film, has taken his revenge. Nonsense, Poirot said sharply, though Miss Marple could see he was disturbed. This is theater, staging. Someone wishes us to believe in curses and supernatural vengeance. But I do not believe. I see only human malice here. But the door was locked, Clay protested. I had the only key. No one could have entered. Then you entered, Poirot said flatly. Clay's face hardened. I did not, sir. I swear upon my honor. Honor among servants is as rare as truth among murderers. Poirot examined the room carefully. The windows, all locked from the inside. A secret passage, perhaps? Not in this room, sir. I know this house intimately. There are no hidden passages here. Miss Marple had been studying the bloody message. Monsieur Poirot, the blood is still wet. This was done very recently, within the last few minutes. While we were all in the library, Poirot mused. Or were we? Clay, you left to check on the body. When exactly? Perhaps 10 minutes ago, sir. And the rest of you? Did anyone else leave the library? Miss Marple mentally reviewed the past quarter hour. Vivian went to powder her nose, I believe, and Miles Garvey stepped out briefly, he said, to get air. Both of them protested immediately. I went to the lavatory, Vivian said coldly. If that's a crime, arrest me now. I was on the terrace, Miles added. The French doors in the drawing room were open. I needed to clear my head. This is all insane. Insane, Poirot agreed, or carefully calculated to appear so. Come, we return to the library. And this time no one leaves. No one at all. We will remain together until dawn if necessary. As they filed back through the corridors, Miss Marple found herself walking beside Clay. The butler's composure had returned, but she could see the strain beneath it. Clay, she said quietly, how long have you served Sir Alaric? 15 years, madam. You must know his secrets, then. The rumors the Reverend mentioned, were they true? Clay's expression became carefully neutral. Sir Alaric was a complex man, madam. He believed that art justified any means, and he sacrificed. Did he hurt people in pursuit of his vision? Yes. Did those people have cause to hate him? Without question. Including yourself? Clay met her eyes directly. I had more cause than most, madam. Sir Alaric was my father. Miss Marple stopped walking. Your father? My mother was an actress in his early films. When she became pregnant, he dismissed her. She died when I was 10. I came here 5 years later, using my mother's maiden name, seeking, I don't know what, acknowledgement, perhaps, or revenge. But over time, I found neither mattered. He was simply a man, flawed and obsessed. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. Did he know who you were? Eventually, yes. 3 years ago, I told him. He laughed and said I had wasted my life on resentment. Perhaps he was right. Clay's voice was bitter. But I didn't kill him, Miss Marple. Despite everything, I didn't want him dead. I wanted him to finally see me. Truly see me. Death cheated me of that. They had reached the library. Poirot was arranging everyone again, this time with even more deliberate placement. He positioned Clay near the door, where he could observe everyone. Miss Marple he placed near the fire, with Eleanor still clinging to her. The others were distributed around the room, with careful attention to sight lines. "Now," Poirot said, positioning himself before the fireplace once more, "we must examine what the Reverend's flight tells us. It could indicate guilt, or it could indicate knowledge that made him fear for his life. Which do you think it is, Mademoiselle Penrose?" Eleanor raised her red-rimmed eyes. "I don't know. Lionel has always been intense, passionate about his faith, about right and wrong. If he believed Alaric was evil, genuinely evil, he might have convinced himself that killing him was righteous. But could he have arranged the technical aspects?" Poirot pressed. "The film alteration, the projector modification?" "No," Miles interjected. "Absolutely not. I've spoken with the Reverend about cinema. He considers it all frivolous at best, sinful at worst. He wouldn't know the first thing about film restoration or projection equipment, unless he was pretending ignorance," Vivian suggested. "People often hide their true knowledge." "True," Poirot agreed. "But Miss Marple, and I suspect there may be two people involved, one with technical skill, one with motive or moral justification. The Reverend could be half of such a partnership." "With whom?" Eleanor asked. "That is what we must determine." Poirot began to pace, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us approach this differently. Let us consider the film itself, not as evidence, but as art. What was it trying to say? What message did Sir Alaric intend to convey? That death is inevitable?" Miles suggested. "That we're all destined to meet our end?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps something more specific. Miss Marple, you noticed a reflection in the window. You saw that the film continued moving when it appeared to jam. What does this tell us?" Miss Marple considered. "That there were indeed two reels running simultaneously. One created the illusion of the film jamming at the crucial moment, when Sir Alaric was supposedly murdered on screen. The other continued playing, creating the effect I saw in the reflection. Exactment. And this dual projection, it required a mechanism more sophisticated than a simple projector could provide. Someone rebuilt that machine substantially. Who had the opportunity?" "Miles," Vivian said immediately. "He was alone with it for over an hour. I was setting it up as Sir Alaric instructed." Miles protested. "And he was with me for most of that time, supervising every adjustment." "Most of that time," Poirot repeated. "But not all? When was Sir Alaric not present?" Miles thought back. "He left for perhaps 10 minutes. He said he needed to speak with Clay about the after-film refreshments." "Clay," Poirot called, "is this true? Did Sir Alaric speak with you about refreshments?" The butler's expression was unreadable. "No, sir. I received all my instructions that morning. Sir Alaric did not speak to me during the hour before the screening." Miles looked stricken. "Then where did he go? What was he doing?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple suggested quietly, "he was making final adjustments to his masterpiece. Not the film we watched, but the performance we witnessed. His own death." "You return to the suicide theory," Poirot noted. "But I have explained why I do not believe it." "I know," Miss Marple said. "But humor me for a moment. Suppose Sir Alaric did plan to die during the screening, not by his own hand directly, but by creating circumstances where his death became inevitable. He drugs himself with ether beforehand, rendering himself unconscious or severely impaired. He arranges for the razor to be placed conspicuously. He alters the film to show his own murder. And then someone else completes his vision? Poirot stroked his mustache. You suggest he created the opportunity for murder, invited his enemies to attend, and waited to see who would take the bait. It would be extraordinarily manipulative, Miss Marple acknowledged. But from what we've heard of Sir Alaric's character, is it impossible? Nothing is impossible with that man, Vivian said bitterly. He saw people as raw material for his art. If he could create one final masterpiece by engineering his own death and exposing a killer in the process, he would consider his greatest achievement. But then who killed him? Eleanor asked desperately. If he created the opportunity, who accepted it? Poirot suddenly stopped pacing. His face had taken on the expression of intense concentration that Miss Marple was beginning to recognize, the look of a man assembling scattered pieces into a coherent whole. Mademoiselle Marple, he said slowly, you mentioned that you smelled ether in the cinema room. You have medical knowledge through your nephew, yes? When would the ether need to be administered to render Sir Alaric unconscious by the time of the screening? It depends on the method, Miss Marple replied. If inhaled through a cloth, the effects will be nearly immediate but brief. If ingested, mixed with alcohol, perhaps the onset will be slower but longer lasting, perhaps 15 to 20 minutes. And Sir Alaric drank sherry before dinner. 2 glasses, I observed, who served those drinks. Clay, Eleanor said, but you can't think. I think nothing yet. Clay, the sherry, where did you pour it? In the library, sir, from the decanter Sir Alaric kept there. I poured 1 glass at Sir Alaric's request when he first entered the room. He drank it quickly and requested a second, which I also provided. Did anyone else have access to that decanter? Clay hesitated. The library was open all afternoon, sir. Anyone in the house could have entered. But who did enter? You were present for much of the afternoon. Who visited the library before the gathering? Miss Vale, sir, and Reverend Cottam, and... Clay paused. Master Miles, briefly. Miles went pale. I was looking for Sir Alaric. I needed to confirm some details about the projection. I didn't touch anything in the library. The Reverend said he was looking for Sir Alaric as well, Miss Marple recalled, to discuss the charitable donation privately. And I told you I wanted to see the film canister, Vivian added. I looked in the library, but the reels were kept elsewhere. So all 3 of you had access, Poirot concluded. The Reverend Miles and Vivian, any of you could have added ether to the sherry, and yet the Reverend has fled, suggesting either guilt or fear, which brings me back to the question of what is he afraid? The answer came from an unexpected source. Eleanor had been sitting quietly, but now she rose, her face set with determination. He's afraid of me, she said clearly, or rather, of what I might reveal. Lionel Cottam has been blackmailing Alaric for the past year. I discovered this by accident. I found letters in Alaric's desk. The Reverend learned about our father's involvement in those horrible films, and he threatened to expose the Penrose family publicly unless Alaric paid him. Eleanor, Vivian gasped. Why didn't you tell us? Because I was ashamed. Because it implicated all of us, our whole family legacy. And because... She faltered. Because Lionel said he would use the money for good works, for the church. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that some redemption could come from our family's sins. But Sir Alaric refused to pay? Poirot guessed. Eventually, yes, 3 weeks ago, He told Lionel he would expose himself if necessary, make a public confession, and destroy the Reverend's leverage. He said he wanted to be free of the past, even if it meant scandal. That's when he invited everyone here tonight. He said he was going to screen the end of The Whisperer and then reveal everything. About our father, about the Cursed production, about Thomas Whalen's death. He said it would be his final act of artistic honesty. And Reverend Cottam could not allow this, Poirot said, nodding, because if Sir Alaric confessed freely, there would be no more blackmail payments. The Reverend's source of income would disappear. So he came here tonight not to receive a donation, but to prevent a confession. By killing Alaric, Miles said, but how? He doesn't have the technical knowledge to alter the film and projector. No, Poirot agreed, but perhaps he didn't need to. Perhaps the film was already altered by Sir Alaric himself as part of his planned confession. The Reverend simply needed to turn Sir Alaric's theatrical stage into a murder scene. Miss Marple saw it then, the full picture forming. The ether and the sherry, administered by the Reverend when he visited the library. The razor placed by the projector, again by the Reverend, during a supposed prayer in the cinema room. He took advantage of Sir Alaric's own staging to commit murder, knowing the elaborate film will provide confusion and suspects. But the projector modifications, Miles insisted. The gears were VV engraved on them. The Reverend couldn't have done that. No, Poirot said softly. Someone else did that. Someone who wanted to implicate Vivian Vale. And I believe I know who and why. Tell me, Monsieur Garvey, your grandfather the jeweler, does he do work without asking questions? Miles's face hardened. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting that you commissioned those gears from your grandfather, telling him they were for a film prop or a restoration project. You engraved them with VV to point suspicion toward Mademoiselle Vale. You wanted her blamed for the murder. Because you planned to murder Sir Alaric yourself, Vivian finished, her voice filled with realization. You needed a scapegoat. No. Miles backed away. That's insane. Why would I kill him? For money, Poirot said simply. You told us of your gambling debts. But there is more, yes? Sir Alaric discovered something about your restoration work. He learned that you were selling pieces of the old films you restored, individual reels, vintage frames, selling them to collectors and keeping the money. He confronted you yesterday, did he not? Threatened to expose you and ruin your reputation permanently. Miles's silence was damning. You came here tonight planning murder, Poirot continued. You altered projector. You created the VV gears to implicate Vivian. You even arranged with a mysterious visitor at 5 o'clock. You left your work briefly, changed clothes, and entered the side door to be seen by Clay, creating another layer of mystery. But you made one critical error. What error? Miles asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The ring in the film. You wore it while making the alterations of footage, and it appeared in a frame that was supposed to be from 1917. That single anachronism revealed that parts of the film were recently altered, not by Sir Alaric, but by someone in the present day, someone who had access to both the original reels and modern editing equipment. But Miles struggled. Even if I altered parts of the film, that doesn't mean I killed him. The Reverend could have. The Reverend did, Miss Marple said quietly. Or rather, both of you did. Everyone turned to stare at her. She rose from her chair, her pleasant, grandmotherly face stern. You were working together, she said. Not initially, perhaps, but you discovered each other's plans and decided to cooperate. Mr. Garvey, you needed Sir Alaric dead to prevent your exposure, and perhaps to gain access to valuable film materials from his collection. Reverend Cottam needed him dead to prevent the confession that would end the blackmail. You met, perhaps accidentally, perhaps by design, and realized you could help each other. You have no proof, Miles said desperately. But we will find it, Poirot assured him. The telephone may be disrupted, but come morning, the storm will clear and Scotland Yard will arrive. They will investigate thoroughly. They will find the ether bottle hidden wherever the Reverend concealed it, probably in the cinema room where he could access it easily. They will trace the engraved gears to Monsieur Garvey's grandfather. They will discover the edited film frames that show modern elements. And most tellingly, they will find evidence of your meetings, letters, perhaps, or witnesses who saw you together in Henley. Miles Garvey's face had gone gray. He seemed to shrink, his youthful handsomeness dissolving into something smaller and more desperate. It wasn't supposed to be so complicated, he said finally. It was supposed to look like an accident or suicide. Alaric's own theatrical death. The Reverend said. He stopped abruptly. The Reverend said what? Poirot prompted gently. That Alaric deserved judgment. That God had sent us both to be instruments of justice. Miles laughed bitterly. I don't even believe in God. But I believe in the money Alaric's death would bring me. The Reverend promised me first access to the film collection for restoration, exclusive contracts worth thousands. And all I had to do was provide the technical expertise, while he provided the moral justification and the actual killing. So you drugged to share together? Miss Marple asked. No, the Reverend did that. I was only supposed to alter the film and projector to create confusion, to make it seem supernatural or impossible. But then, during the screening, I realized what he was going to do. I saw him stand and move towards Sir Alaric. I should have stopped him, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I watched him cut Alaric's throat in the darkness, and I did nothing. That makes you complicit, Poirot said quietly. An accessory to murder, at the very least. I know. Miles sat down heavily. I've known since the moment it happened. When Eleanor screamed and the lights came on, and I saw the blood, I knew there was no going back. Everything I'd planned, all the clever alterations and misdirections, they were all meaningless, because I helped kill a man. Eleanor was crying again, softly. Vivian sat frozen. Her cigarette burned down to ash between her fingers. Clay stood by the door, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts about his father's murder. Where will the Reverend go? Miss Marple asked. In this storm on these roads? There's a hunting lodge about 3 miles north, Clay said. Old, rarely used, but weatherproof. If Reverend Cottam knows of it, he might try to shelter there until the storm passes. Then we must alert the police as soon as possible, Poirot said. He must not escape. Clay, you will stay here with Monsieur Garvey. Watch him carefully. Miss Marple and I will attempt to reach the village and the constable, even if we must walk. I'll drive you, Eleanor said, standing abruptly. It's my car, and I know these roads better than anyone. If there's a way through, I'll find it. Eleanor, it's too dangerous, Vivian protested. My brother is dead, murdered, and I've spent the evening learning terrible things about my family. Let me do this one thing. Let me help bring his killers to justice. Eleanor's voice was firm with resolution. Poirot nodded. Very well. We leave immediately. Clay, you have your orders. If Monsieur Garvey attempts to flee or does anything suspicious, you are to restrain him by whatever means necessary. Yes, sir. Clay's voice was cold. I assure you, I have no sympathy for my father's murderers. He may not have been a good man, but he was still my father. They will not escape." As they prepared to leave, Miss Marple found herself beside Vivian Vale. The actress looked older now, the careful makeup unable to conceal the lines of age and sorrow. "I'm sorry," Miss Marple said gently. This must have brought back painful memories. Vivian's smile was wan. 20 years of painful memories, Miss Marple. But perhaps now, finally, they could be laid to rest. Alaric is dead, but so is the curse of that film. And I survived. I'm still here, still standing, despite everything he did to destroy me. Perhaps that's revenge enough. Perhaps it is, Miss Marple agreed. Though I suspect what you truly wanted wasn't revenge, but acknowledgement. Recognition that what happened to you and Thomas Whalen was wrong, and that someone cared enough to seek justice. You're very perceptive. Vivian reached out and squeezed Miss Marple's hand. Thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me, not just a faded actress or the bitter ex-lover. Thank you. They went out into the storm together, Poirot, Miss Marple, and Eleanor. The rain lashed at them, and the darkness was profound, broken only by the motor car's headlamps. But Eleanor drove with skill and determination, navigating the flooded lanes with the confidence of someone who had traveled them 1,000 times. Chapter 7. The Climax. They reached the village constable's house after a harrowing journey. The constable, a solid man named Barrett, listened to their account with growing alarm and immediately summoned what assistance he could muster in the middle of the storm. A telephone call was placed to Scotland Yard. The village lines were still functioning, and within an hour a small party had assembled to return to Ravenhurst Manor and pursue Reverend Cottam. By the time they arrived back at the manor, dawn was beginning to break. The storm had diminished to a steady drizzle, and the sky was lightening from black to gray. Clay met them at the door. "Monsieur Garvey is secured in the study," he reported. "He made no attempt to flee. In fact, he's been quite cooperative. He's written out a full confession of his part in the planning." "And the Reverend?" Constable Barrett asked. "No sign, sir. But if you're planning to search the hunting lodge, I can show you the way." They organized a search party. Poirot, despite his years, insisted on accompanying them. Miss Marple remained at the manor with Eleanor, Vivian, and the now guarded Miles Garvey. In the library, with weak morning light filtering through the windows, Miss Marple made tea while Eleanor stared into the dying fire. Vivian had finally retired to her room, exhausted beyond endurance. "I should have known," Eleanor said quietly. "About Lionel's blackmail, about Miles's debts, about all of it. I lived here at Alaric. I should have seen the signs." "You couldn't have prevented this," Miss Marple assured her. "Your brother set events in motion long ago, through his treatment of others, his obsessions, his cruelties. The seeds of this tragedy were planted 20 years ago when Thomas Whalen died. They've simply taken this long to bear their terrible fruit. Will you stay?" Eleanor asked. "After the police have finished, after they've taken Miles and hopefully captured Lionel, will you stay a few days? I don't think I can bear to be alone in this house." "Of course," Miss Marple said warmly. "Though I suspect you won't be alone for long. This house will need to be sorted, your brother's affairs managed. You'll have more to occupy you than you wish, I imagine." "I'm going to destroy the films," Eleanor said suddenly. "All of them, every reel, every frame that Alaric shot. I know there's probably artistic and historical value in some of them, but I don't care. I want every trace of his obsessions burned. Is that wrong of me?" "It's your decision to make," Miss Marple replied, "though perhaps you might consult with a museum or archive first." Some of the films might be worth preserving, if only as a record of the era. Perhaps, Eleanor said doubtfully. I'll think about it. But the end of The Whisperer, that one burns for certain. That cursed thing has caused enough harm. An hour later, Poirot and the search party returned, dragging a bedraggled and sullen Reverend Cottam between them. They had found him in the hunting lodge, as Clay had predicted, attempting to wait out the storm before making his escape to London. In the library, with Constable Barrett present and taking notes, Poirot orchestrated a final confrontation. Miles Garvey and Reverend Cottam were brought face to face, and the full story emerged under Poirot's relentless questioning. The Reverend had indeed been blackmailing Sir Alaric, using knowledge of the Penrose family's dark cinematic past. When Sir Alaric threatened to make a public confession that would nullify the blackmail, the Reverend panicked. He had become dependent on the money, not for church works as he claimed, but for gambling debts his own, dark mirror of Miles Garvey's situation. Miles had discovered the Reverend's desperation by accident, overhearing a heated telephone conversation between the Reverend and his creditor. Seeing an opportunity, Miles had approached him with a proposition. Together, they could eliminate Sir Alaric and both profit. Then, perhaps, Vivian said with a slight smile, his death is the ultimate irony. The man who captured images meant to confuse and mystify, killed in a manner that was ultimately transparent. Two murderers working together, motivated by the most ordinary of sins, greed and fear. No artistic mystery at all, just human weakness revealed in harsh light. There's still one mystery, Clay said from a position near the door. Everyone turned to look at him, the blood writing in the study. The Whisperer sees all. Who wrote that? The Reverend and Mr. Garvey both claim they didn't do it. Silence fell. Poirot and Miss Marple exchanged glances. I believe, Poirot said slowly, that may have been Sir Alaric himself. But he was dead, Eleanor protested. His throat was cut. How could he have written anything? He was dying, not dead, Poirot corrected. Remember, the blood was still flowing when we first saw him. The cut was deep, but not instantly fatal. He would have had perhaps a minute, perhaps two, of consciousness remaining. Time enough to drag himself to the study, to write his final message. But we place him on the settee, Clay objected, and he must have risen from it, with his last strength to write those words. Then he collapsed and died there on the floor where we found him the second time. It explains the disturbed body, the locked door. There was no mysterious intruder, only a dying man making one final artistic statement. The Whisperer sees all, Miss Marple repeated. What did he mean? Perhaps that he knew, Vivian suggested. Knew he was being murdered, knew who was responsible, and wanted to leave evidence, a clue. Or perhaps, Eleanor said quietly, he was acknowledging his own crimes. The Whisperer, conscience, sees everything, even the sins we think are hidden. In his last moments, perhaps Alaric finally faced the truth of what he'd done, who he'd hurt. We'll never know for certain, Poirot said. And perhaps that's fitting. Let Sir Alaric keep one final mystery. His life was full of them. Let his death retain at least this one secret meaning. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. They spent that final night at Ravenhurst Manor in relative peace. The house, which had seemed so threatening in the storm and darkness, appeared almost benign in the settled weather. Ghosts, if they walked at all, walked quietly. In the morning, Poirot and Miss Marple prepared to depart. Eleanor offered them breakfast, which they accepted, and over eggs and toast and excellent coffee, they discussed practical matters, How Eleanor should handle the police investigation, what she should do about the film collection, whether she should speak to press. Say as little as possible, Poirot advised. Let the police handle announcements. In a week or two, this will be merely another sensational murder in the newspapers, and then it will be forgotten. People have short memories for tragedies that don't touch them personally. I hope you're right, Eleanor said. I don't want to be known forever as the sister of the murdered film director. I want to be just Eleanor again. Ordinary Eleanor. You will be, Miss Marple assured her. Give it time. Vivian had already left, driven to the station by Clay to catch an early train to London. She had taken with her a small case of film reels, not the entire collection, just those that featured her performances. I don't know if I'll ever watch them, she'd said at parting, but I want them near me. Proof that I once existed, once mattered. You still matter, Miss Marple had told her. You're a survivor, Miss Vale. That takes strength. Now, as Poirot and Miss Marple settled into Poirot's motor car for the drive back to London, they took one last look at Ravenhurst Manor. It stood white and geometric against the autumn sky, beautiful in its way, but cold. A house without a heart, Miss Marple thought. Perhaps Eleanor was right to sell it. An interesting case, Poirot remarked as they drove away. Murder and cinema, art and death. Not my usual investigation. But solved successfully nonetheless, Miss Marple said, thanks largely to your expertise in reading human nature, and to your observations, mademoiselle. You saw things I might have missed, the reflection in the window, the quality of Eleanor's distress, the significance of small details. You have the soul of a detective. I have the soul of a village busybody, Miss Marple corrected with a smile. It amounts to much the same thing, I suppose. Paying attention to people, noticing when things don't quite fit, understanding that human nature is consistent in its patterns. Perhaps we should work together again sometime, Poirot suggested. Your village wisdom and my professional expertise. We make a formidable team, do we not? Perhaps we do, Miss Marple agreed, though I hope it will be under happier circumstances. This case was fascinating, but also deeply sad. All those damaged people, all that pain stemming from one man's obsessions. That is the nature of murder, I fear. It is rarely a happy business. But we bring justice, you and I. We ensure that the guilty are punished and the innocent protected. That is our purpose. They drove on through the English countryside, leaving Ravenhurst Manor and its ghost behind. The sun was fully up now, bright and warm, burning away the last traces of storm. In villages they passed. Life continued normally. Shopkeepers opening their stores, children walking to school, the ordinary bustle of everyday existence. I will return to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple said, and I will have quite a story to tell, though I suspect I'll omit some of the more disturbing details. My friends are fascinated by murder in the abstract, but the reality is often more than they wish to hear. You will describe it as quite interesting, Poirot predicted with a, we will reconstruct the evening. Each of you will tell me, in detail, your movement from the moment you arrived at Ravenhurst until the moment of Sir Alaric's death, and we will see what patterns emerge, what contradictions reveal themselves. Chapter 4. The Film That Shouldn't Exist. They worked through the accounts methodically. Eleanor had arrived early, around 4 o'clock, having driven from London. She had spent time in the garden, trying to calm her nerves. I had a premonition, she said softly. All day. I felt something terrible was going to happen. Alaric and we had quarreled recently. He told me things about our family, about our father, that I didn't want to hear. I came tonight hoping to reconcile, but instead, Vivian Vale had arrived at 6, driven by her companion, who had been dismissed and told to return the following day. She had immediately requested to see the film reels, which Sir Alaric had refused. He enjoyed denying me things, she said. It gave him pleasure to watch me beg. She had wandered the house, visited the cinema room when no one was watching, then returned to her guest room to rest before dinner. Miles Garvey had come at 5:30, carrying additional equipment for the projection. He had spent over an hour setting up the projector under Sir Alaric's supervision. He was very particular about everything. Miles said the angle of projection, the speed of the reels, even the temperature of the room. He said conditions had to be perfect for the film's premiere. Reverend Cottam had arrived at 6:30, the last guest before Poirot and Miss Marple. He admitted he had gone to the cinema room, though he claimed his visit was brief. I prayed there, he said. I felt the evil in that room. I prayed for protection. Protection for yourself or for Sir Alaric? Poirot asked. For us all. Poirot himself had arrived at 6:45, having driven directly from London. He had been shown to his room by Clay, spent a few minutes freshening up, then joined the gathering in the library just before 7. I observed Sir Alaric closely during cocktails, Poirot said. He was agitated, yes, but also excited, like a man anticipating a grand revelation. He drank 2 glasses of sherry before dinner. Unusual, as he later told me. He typically abstained before screenings to keep his senses sharp. Miss Marple's account confirmed Eleanor's timeline. She had arrived at 6:15 and had been shown around the house by Eleanor before joining the others. So, Poirot summarized, between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock, all of you had time to prepare, to explore the house, to plan. The question is, who used that time to arrange murder? You're forgetting something, Miles Garvey said suddenly. The film itself. You keep talking about who had access to the projector, to the house, to Sir Alaric. But what about the film? Someone altered it. That didn't happen this evening. That took time, skill, planning. Weeks, probably, maybe months. Poirot nodded slowly. You are correct. The film is a key, both to the method and to the murderer's identity. We must examine it. Can it be viewed again? It should still be in projector. Miles said, unless someone removed it. They returned to the cinema room in a group, no one willing to be left alone. The room felt different now. Colder, more malevolent. The projector still sat on its platform, and when Miles examined it, he found the reels still in place. We can watch it again, he said. Though I'm not sure I want to. We must, Poirot insisted. Miss Marple observed discrepancies the first time. We need to understand what we truly saw. Reluctantly, they took seats again, though no one sat where they had sat before. Miss Marple noticed that Vivian chose a chair near the door, as if ready to flee. Eleanor refused to sit at all, standing near the back with her hands clasped tightly. The projector whirred to life again. The title card appeared, The End of the Whisperer. But this time, watching with analytical rather than passive eyes, Miss Marple saw things she had missed before. The film was indeed altered. She could see the subtle shifts in quality where new footage had been spliced in. The scenes showing the current cinema room were clearly recent additions, carefully tinted and treated to match the aged look of the original film. And there was something else. During the murder sequence, when the shadowy figure attacked the young Sir Alaric, the attacker's movements seemed choreographed, rehearsed, more like a dance than a genuine struggle. Stop, Poirot commanded. Miles, can you freeze the film on a particular frame? I can advance it manually, frame by frame. Do so. Return to the murder scene. Miles rewound the film and then moved it forward incrementally. The murder played out in stuttering slow motion. And there, in one frame, Poirot saw it. The attacker's hand, he said, pointing at the screen. Look at the hand that holds a weapon. What do you see? Miss Marple leaned forward. A ring on the fourth finger. Quite distinctive. It appears to have a stone set in an unusual mounting. Indeed, and I have seen that ring before. Tonight, in fact. Poirot turned to face the group. Who among you wears such a ring? Silence. Then, slowly, Miles Garvey extended his right hand. On his fourth finger was indeed a ring, a heavy silver piece set with dark stone in an ornate Art Deco setting. It was my grandfather's, Miles said, his voice strained. He was a jeweler. It's been in my family for generations. Yet it appears in a film made in 1917. Poirot said softly, How remarkable. Unless, of course, the film was not made in 1917 at all. Or rather, parts of it were not. Miles's face had gone gray. I don't understand what you're suggesting. I think you do, but let us continue watching. There's more to see. The film played on. The death scene concluded, and the bizarre sequence showing the current audience began. But this time, Miss Marple noticed something crucial. The figures representing the audience were not actually sitting in the chairs. They were superimposed, transparent, ghostly. It was a double exposure, created by film in the empty room, and then overlaying images of the people. When were we photographed? She asked aloud. And by whom? I can answer that, Clay said quietly. Sir Alaric had cameras installed throughout the house 3 months ago. He said it was for security, but I suspected he was filming everyone secretly. He had an editing suite in the East Wing where he spent hours alone. He was creating this film, Poirot said, or rather, recreating it, adding to it, using footage of his guests to create the illusion we witnessed. But why? What purpose did it serve beyond theatricality? To confuse us, Miss Marple suggested. To make us focus on the impossible, the film predicting his death, rather than the possible. Someone cutting his throat while we were distracted. The film reached its conclusion. The final frame showed the young Sir Alaric's face in close-up, his eyes wide, his mouth forming words. Miles advanced frame by frame through the sequence. And there, in the very last frame before the film ended, something appeared that hadn't been visible during normal projection speed. A reflection in Sir Alaric's eyes. The image was tiny, distorted, but unmistakable. It was a figure holding a camera. And standing beside that figure, barely visible, was another person. Can you enlarge that? Poirot asked urgently. Not with this equipment. But I can make an educated guess based on the silhouettes. Miles studied the frozen frame. 2 people, one operating the camera, the other watching. The camera operator appears to be male, of medium height. The observer is smaller, slighter. Could be female or a young man. Or a young woman, Vivian Vale said, her voice strange. It's me. I'm the one watching. I can see myself, even in that tiny reflection. I wore a distinctive brooch that day, my grandmother's cameo. You can just make out its outline on the figure's collar. Everyone turned to stare at her. She met their gazes with something like defiance mixed with sorrow. I was there when Thomas Whalen died, she said. I saw it happen, and it wasn't an accident. Chapter 5, The Red Herrings. The room erupted in exclamations and questions. Poirot raised his hand for silence. Mademoiselle Vale, you will explain. Everything. From the beginning. Vivian Vale lit another cigarette with trembling hands. In the flickering light of the projector, she looked both older and younger than her years, a woman haunted by decades-old memories. I was 23, she began. Alaric was 36, already famous in the film world. He chose me from dozens of hopefuls to star in the end of The Whisperer. I was dazzled by him, by his brilliance, by his absolute certainty that he was creating something revolutionary. I would have done anything for him, and he knew it. She paused, drawing deeply on her cigarette. The film was ambitious, too ambitious. Perhaps Alaric wanted to capture something no one had filmed before. The moment of death, genuine fear, real terror. Not acted, but experienced. He experimented with techniques to achieve this. Drugs, sometimes. Hypnosis. Psychological manipulation. Thomas Whalen, the cameraman, went along with it all. He was as obsessed as Alaric. Perhaps more so. What happened on the day he died? Miss Marple asked gently. We were filming the final scene, the murder scene. Alaric was playing the victim, as you saw. The script called for the attacker to be in shadow, anonymous. But Thomas had an idea. He wanted to film from above, to capture the moment from a god's perspective. He called it. He rigged a platform high up in the rafters of the stage where we were shooting. This was in London, not here. The platform wasn't secure. I could see that. I told them it was dangerous. But they were both drunk on their vision. They wouldn't listen. She closed her eyes, remembering. Thomas climbed up with his camera. The scene began. Alaric was on the floor. The actor playing the killer approached. And then the platform gave way. Thomas fell. The camera fell with him. He was dead before we could reach him. The camera shattered. But the film survived. It captured everything, including Thomas's fall. You could hear his scream on the soundtrack. Even though it was supposed to be a silent picture, the recording equipment caught it. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. Alaric destroyed that footage immediately. He took the film that showed Thomas's death and burned it. Then he locked away the rest of the film and declared the project cursed. But he kept the reels. He always kept them. I think part of him treasured that film because it represented his purest artistic vision, even though it had been born from tragedy. Why did you never speak of this before? Poirot asked. Alaric made me promise. He paid me, quite handsomely, to keep silent. The official story was that Thomas had been drunk, that it was a tragic accident, no one's fault. And I needed the money. My career was just beginning. So I took it and said nothing. Her laugh was bitter. Of course, Alaric then spread rumors that I was the one who had caused the accident, that I was unlucky, cursed. He destroyed my career anyway, but he kept me silent about his culpability in Thomas's death. So you came here tonight for revenge, Poirot concluded. I came here because he invited me. He said he wanted to show me the restored film, that he wanted to make amends. I should have known better. Alaric never made amends. He only collected more material for his art. And yet he is dead, Poirot pointed out, murdered while screening the very film that had haunted both of you. You say you wanted revenge. Perhaps you took it. Vivian met his gaze steadily. I wanted him to suffer, yes. I wanted him to feel the fear that Thomas felt, that I've felt for 20 years. But I didn't kill him. I didn't have the courage. Or perhaps I simply wanted him to live with his guilt, as I've had to live with mine. Before Poirot could respond, Eleanor spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. There's something else you should know about the film, about Alaric's obsessions. She turned to Clay. Tell them what Alaric told you about our father. Clay's composed expression cracked slightly. Sir Alaric discovered, late in life, that our father, Eleanor's and his father, had also been involved in early cinema, not as a director or actor, but as a financier. He funded several productions, including some that were morally questionable, films that exploited performers, that recorded things no one should record. What things? Miss Marple asked, though she suspected she knew. Deaths, Clay said flatly. Genuine deaths, filmed for the entertainment of wealthy patrons. Accidents arranged to appear natural. Suicides encouraged and captured. It was an underground trade in the early days of cinema, before regulations, before anyone understood the power of the moving image. Sir Alaric learned that his father had financed several such films. He became obsessed with the idea that his own artistic impulse, his need to capture truth through film, was inherited from this dark legacy. And did you believe him? Poirot asked. I didn't want to, but then he showed me letters, documents, proof that our father had been involved in these horrible productions. And he said, her voice broke. He said that the end of The Whisper was his attempt to purge that inheritance, to create a death scene so perfect, so artistic, that it would redeem the family name. By doing what? Miss Marple asked. The film shows his own death, but that was acted, surely. Originally, yes, Eleanor said, but Alaric told me he planned to change that. He said this screening would be his masterpiece. He was going to die on film, for real this time. Suicide staged his art. He asked me to arrange it, to help him. I refused. I thought he was mad. But what if he found someone else to help him? What if his death was exactly what he planned? The room fell silent as they absorbed this possibility. Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully. An interesting theory, he said finally. Suicide arranged to appear as murder, creating a final film more powerful than anything he could achieve in life. It has a certain artistic logic, but I do not believe it. Why not? Miles Garvey asked. Because of the ether, the staging, the razor deliberately placed. These are not the actions of a man committing suicide, but of a murderer attempting to confuse. And because of the blood, writing in the study, Sir Alaric could not have done that after his death. Poirot paused. Unless someone is continuing his artistic vision posthumously. He looked at each of them in turn. Miles Garvey, the restorer with debts and opportunity. Vivian Vale, the actress with a 20-year-old grudge and guilty knowledge. Eleanor Penrose, the sister burdened with family secrets. Reverend Cottam, the moral guardian with hidden connections. And Clay, the illegitimate son seeking recognition or revenge. One of you killed Sir Alaric Penrose. Poirot said, one of you arranged this elaborate theatrical murder, and one of you knows the truth about this film and what it was meant to accomplish. I will discover which one. But first, we must understand Projector itself. Miles, you said the mechanism had been modified. Show me. They gathered around Projector as Miles pointed out the alterations. The gears had been replaced with parts that appeared to come from a clock, silver and precisely engineered. Each gear was etched with initials, VV. These weren't here when I set up Projector. Miles said, I would have noticed. Someone changed in between my setup and the screening. VV, Vivian Vale said softly. Vivian Vale. Someone is trying to implicate me. But I swear I didn't alter this machine. Yet your gloves bore machine oil, Poirot reminded her. From touching the film canister, not from modifying equipment. I wouldn't know how to do something like this. Then who would? Poirot looked at Miles. You have the expertise. So did Sir Alaric, Miles countered. He was a master of cinematic machinery. He could have made these modifications himself. To implicate Mademoiselle Vale in his own planned suicide? Poirot shook his head. No, this is the work of someone else. Someone who wanted to create a trail of evidence leading to multiple suspects, confusing the investigation. Miss Marple had been examining the gears more closely. Monsieur Poirot, these initials, they're very precisely engraved. This would take specialized equipment and skill. Where might one have such work done? A jeweler, Clay said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. There's a jeweler in Henley who does custom work. Sir Alaric used him occasionally for props in his films. Pocket watches, rings, that sort of thing. And what is this jeweler's name? Poirot asked. Garvey. Clay said, looking at Miles, John Garvey. I believe he's your grandfather, isn't he? Miles's face went white, then red. Yes, but that doesn't mean I didn't ask him to make those gears. I didn't know they existed until just now. Yet they bear the initials of Mademoiselle Vale. Poirot mused. Who would wish to implicate both of you? Who benefits from creating confusion between the two people with the most obvious access to the film and equipment? The answer hung in the air, unspoken but increasingly obvious. Someone who wanted both of us blamed. Vivian said slowly. Someone who could move between us, who had access to both the film and our secrets. Someone who stood to gain from Sir Alaric's death, but needed scapegoats to avoid suspicion. Eleanor, Miles said suddenly, you inherit Ravenhurst and Sir Alaric's fortune, don't you? Eleanor's face went gray. No. Yes, I suppose I do. But I didn't want it. I never wanted any of this. Yet you invited Miss Marple. Poirot noted. Why? You barely knew her. I told you I had a premonition. I felt something terrible would happen. I wanted someone here who could help if something went wrong, or witness your innocence. Poirot suggested gently. A respected spinster who could testify that you were seated beside her throughout the murder, that you could not possibly have killed your brother? Eleanor was trembling. I didn't kill him. I swear on my life, I didn't kill Alaric. I believe you, Miss Marple said quietly. But I think you know more than you've told us. About the visitor this afternoon. About what your brother planned. About who hated him enough to arrange this elaborate death. Before Eleanor could respond, the lights suddenly went out, plunging the room into darkness. Chapter 6. The Turning Point. Someone screamed. Miss Marple thought it might have been Eleanor. There was a confusion of movement, voices calling out, the sound of something heavy falling. Stay where you are, Poirot commanded. No one move. But it was too late. In the darkness, Miss Marple heard footsteps running, the door to the cinema room opening and slamming shut. Someone had fled. Light blazed suddenly. Miles Garvey had found a torch and was pointing it around the room. They counted heads quickly. Everyone was present except one. Reverend Cottam was gone. After him, Poirot ordered, but Miles was already moving toward the door. He yanked it open, and they spilled out into the corridor. By the light of the torch, they could see a figure at the far end of the hallway, running toward the front entrance. They gave chase, but the Reverend had a head start. By the time they reached the entrance hall, the front door stood open, rain pouring in from the storm outside. The Reverend had fled into the night. Let him go, Poirot said, breathing heavily. In this storm, he will not get far, and his flight suggests guilt most clearly. But the lights, Miss Marple said. Someone cut the power. Was it the Reverend? And if so, why would he call attention to himself by fleeing? Unless he didn't cut the power, Miles suggested. Unless someone else did, and he panicked and ran. Clay appeared from a side corridor, carrying a lantern. The generator has been tampered with, sir. Someone disconnected the main line. I can restore it, but it will take a few minutes. Do so, Poirot instructed. And everyone else, back to the library. We must consider what this development means. As Clay worked on the generator, and the others returned to the library, Miss Marple lingered in the entrance hall with Poirot. The little detective was staring out at the rain-soaked darkness where the Reverend had disappeared. "You're troubled," Miss Marple observed. "The Reverend's flight. It is too obvious, too convenient. When people flee, they usually do so because they panic, not because they calculate. But everything else about this murder has been calculated with precision. Why would the murderer suddenly panic now?" "Unless the Reverend isn't the murderer," Miss Marple said. "Or unless there's more than one person involved." "Explain your thinking, mademoiselle. Consider what we know. The murder required elaborate preparation. The altered film, the modified projector, the ether, the staging. But the violence of cutting Sir Alaric's throat, the boldness of doing it in a room full of people, that suggests passion as well as planning. What if two people were involved? One providing the technical expertise, the other the motive and will to kill." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Ah, you think like a detective, mademoiselle. Yes, this has the flavor of conspiracy. But between whom? Who would work together? Not the obvious pairs," Miss Marple said thoughtfully. "Everyone assumes Vivian and Miles might have cooperated. She with motive, he with expertise. But that's too transparent. What if the real partnership is less obvious? The Reverend and Eleanor?" Poirot suggested. "The guilty sister and the moral guardian, together purging an evil influence? Or Miles and Eleanor, the indebted restorer and the sister who inherits? They could split the fortune. Or perhaps," Poirot said slowly, "the partnership we have not considered. Because one partner is someone we trust." He was looking at Miss Marple as he said this, and she understood immediately. "Clay. You're thinking of Clay. He had motive. Sir Alaric was his father who never acknowledged him. He had access. He knew every inch of this house. And he has been present but peripheral throughout. The perfect position for someone orchestrating events while appearing uninvolved. But partner with whom?" Before Poirot could answer, the lights suddenly blazed back on. Clay appeared in the hallway. "The generator is restored, sir." They returned to the library where the others waited anxiously. Vivian had poured herself a brandy and sat clutching it. Miles paced by the windows, watching the storm. Eleanor had collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. "Now," Poirot said,